All right, so today we're diving into the world of sculpting. It's always fascinated me, this idea of taking raw materials like stone, metal, glass, and turning them into something incredible. For anyone listening who's thinking about a career as a sculptor, what kind of insights did your stack of articles reveal?
Yeah, it's interesting. What really stood out to me was the emphasis on the blend of artistic vision and like real world skills that are needed today.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's not just about raw talent anymore, right?
No, not at all. The articles highlighted how crucial things like business sense, marketing yourself, even having some grasp of technology, it's all part of it now.
It's funny you should say that because one article I was looking at actually mentioned 3D printing and laser cutting being used in sculpting these days. It's like sculptors are stepping straight out of a sci-fi movie studio or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that these technologies are replacing the traditional tools of the trade, the chisel and hammer, but it's more like they're giving sculptors these entirely new ways of creating and even showcasing their work.
I can imagine. So it's not just about being artistic. You need to be tech savvy too.
It's definitely becoming more and more important. Think of software like Blender or Autodesk Maya as just extensions of the sculptor's toolkit.
Okay, that makes sense.
The sources I was going through actually mentioned a significant overlap, something like 69%, between the knowledge base of traditional fine arts and these digital tools.
Wow, 69%, that's pretty high. So almost 70% of that foundational knowledge transfers to the digital sculpting world. That's pretty reassuring, honestly.
Right. Especially in areas like form and texture and composition, those fundamental principles still apply.
That makes sense. Okay, so you're telling me someone listening who might not be a coding whiz can still make it in the digital sculpting world. That's a relief. But let's be real. How does a sculptor actually make a living these days? Is the starving artist stereotype a myth or a reality?
Right. It's a valid question, and honestly, the articles didn't shy away from the challenges.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were pretty upfront about it. Competition in the art world, it's fierce. Plus, income can be irregular, and it often involves, long hours, physically demanding work. It's not always glamorous.
So, with all this talk about competition and income being unpredictable, does having formal training give you a leg up? Does it make a difference in terms of making a living?
That's a great question. It's kind of a two-part answer, I think. You've got formal education, and then you've got natural talent. Both are definitely important.
Okay.
A formal art education, while not necessarily mandatory, it does provide a really solid understanding of artistic principles, different techniques, how to work with different materials.
Right. The fundamentals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether you go the formal education route or not, there are certain skills like your artistic creativity, your manual dexterity, really understanding your materials in depth. Those things require dedicated practice no matter what.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, one thing that struck me when I was going through these articles was how much they emphasize business skills for artists. Like marketing, networking is like every sculptor needs to be an entrepreneur on top of everything else.
It's true, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is essential these days, the whole business side of things.
Yeah.
The articles really hammered that point home, like how vital it is for artists to be able to showcase their work effectively, build those connections, and really understand how to navigate the art market. Because it's not just about what you create anymore.
Right.
It's also about how you actually get it out there in the world, how you connect with people.
So are you saying we can forget that image of the lone artist, hidden away in their studio, toiling away in obscurity?
Well, I mean, a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't think that image ever completely goes away, does it?
true.
But you're right. To be successful as a sculptor today, you've got to be a skilled communicator and, yeah, even a bit of a salesperson, like it or not.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that because I think one of the articles actually put a figure on that, saying that having a grasp of sales and marketing makes up something like 67% of the essential knowledge base for a successful sculpting career these days.
Wow, 67%. That's huge.
Mm.
I mean, it really goes to show, doesn't it, that it's not all just about the art itself anymore.
No, not at all. But it does make sense when you think about it. You've got to be able to sell your work to actually make a living, right?
Exactly.
So I'm curious, how are sculptors actually getting their work out there these days? Is it all about the traditional gallery still, or has the internet kind of taken over as the main stage?
It's actually a really fascinating mix of both. You've still got the established routes, right? The galleries, the exhibitions, the public art installations. Those definitely still carry a lot of weight in the art world. But the digital space, it's just exploded. It's opened up all these incredible new avenues for artists.
I can imagine.
We're talking online galleries, social media platforms, even things like virtual reality exhibitions.
It's amazing. It's like the whole world is a potential gallery now.
Exactly.
So you could have your work like in a prestigious gallery in Paris, and someone in Tokyo could be experiencing it at the same time through VR. That just blows my mind.
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
It is. What about actually finding sculpting jobs or commissions? Is it still a lot of word of mouth, or are there like platforms specifically for artists to, showcase their portfolios and find opportunities?
Word of mouth is definitely still huge in the art world. Those personal connections, they're invaluable.
Right.
But just like with showcasing your work, there are all these online platforms now that have become really crucial tools for artists. Websites where you can create a whole professional profile, highlight your skills, your experience, even find open calls for artists, submission opportunities, things like that.
Oh, wow. So it takes some of the guesswork out of it. That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, one thing I've always wondered about is the whole process of actually applying for, art-related jobs or residencies or things like that. I'm guessing you can't just send in a standard resume, right?
No, you're absolutely right.
It's got to be different.
A regular resume just won't cut it in this field. A strong portfolio is an absolute must.
Okay.
And, it really needs to be like a carefully curated showcase of your best work. Something that highlights your unique style, your technical skills, really shows what you're capable of.
Right. It's your chance to shine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, letters of recommendation, especially from, respected figures in the art community, those can definitely carry a lot of weight.
Of course. Yeah. So it sounds like it's all about building that credibility, building a strong network within the art world.
Exactly. That's what it really comes down to, establishing your reputation. And that takes time. It's about consistently putting in the work, producing high-quality pieces, networking, getting your name out there, all of that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that's always kind of blown me away about sculpting is the sheer range of materials that artists use. One minute it's classic bronze or marble. The next minute it's like recycled materials, found objects. I've even seen installations that incorporate light and sound.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about it, isn't it?
It is.
There's this constant evolution, this pushing of boundaries. It's not just about mastering traditional techniques. It's also about finding your own artistic voice, your own unique way of interacting with the world through your chosen materials, whatever those may be.
It's about that personal expression, right?
Okay.
Finding your own style. And it sounds like that expression, that voice, it needs to come through in the business side of things as well, not just the art itself.
For sure.
So we've talked about the competitive landscape, the often unpredictable income. But were there any other downsides or challenges that the articles mentioned that aspiring sculptors should be aware of?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One thing that came up a lot was the whole idea of dedication and resilience.
Yeah.
How much you really need to thrive in this field, beyond just the money side of things.
Right.
You really need to have a high tolerance for uncertainty. There's always going to be rejection. That's just part of it.
Yeah.
And you really have to be okay with putting your work out there, making yourself vulnerable.
That makes a lot of sense. It takes a lot of self-motivation for sure, and probably a pretty thick skin to keep going when things get tough.
Yeah.
I imagine time management is a big deal too, right? Balancing the actual creative work with the business side, the networking, the constant learning.
Oh, absolutely. It's like running your own small business,
Right.
You're the artist, you're the marketer, you're the accountant, you're wearing all these different hats. It takes serious organization and discipline to manage it all effectively.
This has been really eye-opening, honestly. It's so much more dynamic and multifaceted than I ever realized, what it takes to make it as a sculptor these days. But with all the demands and the challenges, there's got to be this incredible sense of fulfillment when you actually see your vision come to life. Right?
Oh, absolutely. There's really no feeling quite like it.
Yeah.
A lot of the articles actually shared stories from sculptors describing that feeling,
Right.
Yeah, this deep sense of accomplishment that comes from taking these raw materials and transforming them into something that has meaning, something that moves people, sparks conversations, maybe even challenges how they see the world. Powerful stuff.
I bet. Okay, so for someone listening right now who's really feeling fired up, ready to take the plunge and pursue a career in sculpting, what would be the single most valuable piece of advice you'd give them based on all your research?
That's a tough one. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that to really make it as a sculptor today, it takes this multifaceted approach. Of course, artistic talent, that dedication to your craft, those are non-negotiables, right?
Right.
But you also really need to focus on those business skills, embrace technology as a creative tool, and be prepared for anything. Cultivate that resilient and adaptable mindset because it's going to be a wild ride.
It sounds like it, but also incredibly rewarding for the right kind of person.
Absolutely. If you're drawn to this kind of work, if you have that passion, it can be an amazing journey.
It does seem like passion is like the common thread here. Like it takes more than just talent, right? You really have to love it, love the process to
Oh, yeah.
truly thrive.
100%.
Mm.
I think that's what shines through in the end, that genuine love for the craft.
Yeah, for sure. What about like signs that someone might be particularly well suited for a career in sculpting? What should people be paying attention to?
Well, obviously, a love of art, enjoying working with your hands, those are pretty fundamental. But beyond that, the research I was looking at pointed to things like an experimental spirit, not being afraid to try new things, to push those boundaries. A strong sense of creativity, obviously, and the ability to think three-dimensionally, to see how things work in space.
Mm.
Someone who's naturally curious, observant, always noticing details, that kind of thing.
It's funny, you don't necessarily think of business savvy as a top skill for an artist, but it sounds like that's become pretty crucial in today's art world.
It really has. And it's not just about like being good at marketing, although that's important too.
Mhm.
It's also about being able to articulate your vision,
Oh, interesting.
explaining your process, the meaning behind your work, being able to tell that story, whether it's through an artist statement, your online presence, gallery talks, it's all connected.
So it's like finding that balance, right? Letting the art speak for itself, but also being able to communicate its value, its significance.
Exactly. And that's where things like networking come in. Building those relationships with gallery owners, art critics, collectors, that human connection is still so important.
It makes sense. So for someone who's literally just starting out, what would you say are some practical first steps they could take just to kind of like dip their toes in the water and see if sculpting is something they'd want to pursue more seriously?
I think just experimenting, getting your hands dirty,
Hmm.
literally.
Yeah.
Try different materials, play around with different techniques, take a workshop, maybe an online course, anything to get a feel for the process. And honestly, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
I love that.
It's all part of the learning process.
Hmm.
That's how we grow as artists.
That's so true. We've talked a lot about the artistic side, the business side, but I imagine there's a pretty physical aspect to sculpting as well, right? Especially when you're dealing with large-scale pieces or heavy materials.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It can be very physically demanding. A lot of sculptors I know, they develop some serious strength and stamina. You're lifting, you're chiseling, maybe even welding, depending on what you're working with. It's a very hands-on profession.
So you need a bit of brawn along with that artistic vision and business sense.
Yeah.
That's a pretty unique combination.
It really is. But I think that's part of what makes this career path so special. It's not for everyone, but for those who are drawn to it, who are willing to put in the work, embrace the challenges and the rewards, it can be an incredibly fulfilling journey.
Well said. I have to say, this whole conversation has really changed how I think about what it means to be a sculptor today.
Me too, honestly. It's evolved so much.
It's so much more than just creating beautiful art, isn't it?
It really is. It's about vision, it's about adaptability, resilience, and most importantly, it's about that unwavering passion to bring your ideas into the world. And hey, who knows? Maybe you'll even inspire the next generation of artists along the way.
I love that. And on that note, I think we're going to have to wrap up this deep dive into the incredible world of sculpting. We've uncovered so many great insights into the skills, the challenges, and the immense rewards that this career path has to offer. So to anyone listening who's feeling that creative spark, who's thinking about giving sculpting a try, go for it. You never know where your passion might lead you. Until next time on The Deep Dive.